Hey everyone, welcome back to Brian's Mysteries and Adventures on Trail. I hope everybody is having a great holiday season so far, and before we get started, I just wanted to wish everybody a happy holiday season, whatever your traditions are, and just remind everybody that the holidays are a season of love and giving and forgiveness, and just hoping that everybody finds happiness this holiday season. And I know it's been a rough few years with everything going on in the world, and I'm just hoping that everybody will have some good time with their family, and wishing everybody a safe and happy holiday. Now, today's case is another case that has been highly requested, and this case is going to take us down to Central America in April of 2014 in the area of Boquete, Panama. Now, of course, I'll have maps up throughout, and I know that, of course, a lot of you are probably very familiar with this case. And the difference in this case is that there is just a ton of information on the case and so many different theories and information. So what I'm going to try and do is just give you the facts and then basically talk about some things that I've never really read about anybody else talking about. Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon were from the Netherlands. Kris was 21 years old and Lisanne was 22, and they had been saving for some time to go on this trip after graduation. And this was roughly March 15th when they got on a plane in Amsterdam. They flew to Costa Rica in Latin America, and then from there they traveled to Boquete in Panama, and they were basically going to be staying there to try and learn the language and improve their language abilities. And at first, the trip was going fine. They were just, hanging out on the beach, enjoying the coast, enjoying different places that they found in the area. Apparently, they had arrived a little early for the host family that they were going to be staying with, so they just had to find some things to do and just hanging out, met some people at local places. After arriving in Panama on March 29th, they decided they moved to Boquete, which is a city on the west side of the country, and it's a very small mountain town in Panama, located on the westernmost province of Chucurí, which is about 37 miles or 60 kilometers from the border of Costa Rica. And it's in Panama's green mountain highlands. It's a beautiful area. It's around 1,200 meters above sea level. The climate is cooler than some of the lower areas, but it's a very scenic location, and a lot of people go there. It's a very touristy place. There's a lot of people that go there to retire and just enjoy the scenic attractions. And Lisanne had graduated with a degree in applied scientists, and Kris was studying for a degree in cultural social education. They were both, like I said, from the Netherlands, and they had met at some point working in this restaurant called the Den Klein Hop restaurant in Amsterdam, and they had both just happened to rent rooms in the same student house. They had saved up for this trip to Panama for a trip after graduation, and they were planning on staying there for a 6-week vacation, 4 of which of these were going to be spent living with a host family as volunteers. Now, there is some discrepancy on this part, but apparently what happened was when they arrived at the home of their host family, they were told that their jobs actually didn't start for another week rather than immediately. So they had nothing to do really. So they just decided to, take some time to explore the area around Boquete and the new sites and everything around them before their job was to start. And this is where it all started. On April 1st of 2014, they left Boquete, and the weather was very good apparently that morning. And they were going to go on this hike of the Pianista Trail, which is an up and down path which is near the Continental Divide. Now, before we go any further, I just want to say there have been a lot of people, web sleuths and other people that have put a ton of work into this case, and I just really give them a lot of props for doing that kind of work, because this case is one of those that really no one seems to feel like it was ever really answered. And I agree. I think that something nefarious happened, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more. But in any event, this day on April 1st, 2014, they went on this hike. Now, the odd thing about it was they had planned to do the same hike the next day with a tour guide, but for whatever reason, they decided to do this hike this day. So they decided to do this summit, which was around 8,000 kilometers from the city. They got a taxi. It dropped them off at the trail. Now, according to the driver, this was around the mid-afternoon time. But again, from the evidence and the lady's cameras suggested it was more around the 11 a.m. time. And it should be around 2 to 3 hours to reach the summit. And so roughly it would have been a 5 to 6 hour round trip. And during this whole time, they were posting on Facebook. They were going to explore this area, and they were saying to meet up with fellow Dutch travelers from the brunch that morning. And they had taken a dog named Blue, who was the dog of the people that they were going to be staying with. And unfortunately, when they set out for this journey, they only had light clothing, tank top, shorts, a light backpack. They had their passports, water. They had their Canon PowerShot camera, and of course their cell phones. They reached the summit roughly around 1 p.m. and for whatever reason, it seems like they decided to just keep going on. And according to the reports, normally tourists at that point just turn around and, check out the lookout at the point of the Pianista Trail and then take the same path back to Boquete. And there are lots of signs placed throughout this area, especially nowadays, warning people not to keep walking further without a guide because of how rugged and dangerous the area is. And unfortunately, they were not equipped for a long period of time in the forest with, they didn't have any survival gears and things like that. They just unfortunately had stuff that would be for a day. But as we can see in their posts, their pictures, they looked happy. There didn't seem to be anything amiss. However, later that evening on April 1st, the dog's owners, the people that they were staying with, were alarmed because the dog came back and the girls weren't with them. Well, the women weren't reported missing until 2 days later on April 3rd, after the family that they were supposed to be staying with and a local guide, the guide that was actually going to be taking them on that same tour the next day, said, well, hey, look, I was supposed to take these girls on this trip and they never showed up. Well, after they were reported missing, authorities immediately got dog teams on the ground, helicopters, all kinds of people on the ground. And of course, this didn't turn up anything. Now, on April 6th, Kris and Leanne's parents, and with the Dutch detectives, flew to Boquete to start their own investigation with specialized equipment and research and search and rescue teams. And this search went on for over 10 days, and they actually the family put up a $30,000 reward. And throughout all this searching and investigating, they found no sign of the women, and they had found none of their belongings as well. So it was just this baffling mystery. What happened to these two women? It wasn't until 2 months later that their remains were found, what we could call very mysterious circumstances, with on some of the authorities claiming it was an accident, while the Dutch private investigators working with the family were convinced that foul play had to be involved. And there are a lot of different twists and holes in this story, and this is where we're going to begin to talk about what happened once they started finding evidence. It led to more clues, which really just sort of made it even more confusing. The discovery of the backpack is what, in my mind, changed this whole investigation. In June of 2014, a local woman found the backpack, which she said in a rice paddy on the bank of the Culebra and Serpent River near the village of Alta Romera, which is around 10.5 miles or 17 kilometers from Boquete and 5 miles from the summit of the Pianista Trail. And it was thought that it was around an 8-hour walk from their last known location. And the village is in this very remote area, which would have been very, very difficult for them to reach on foot. Now, around the same time, Kris Kremers' jeans, shorts, were discovered on a narrow piece of land, just neatly folded on this on this rock. And the people who found the shorts said that they were zipped and folded and placed on the rock high above the water, just like they had been placed there like someone was going for a swim. The police and the Justice Department quickly, of course, got the pack from the woman. But at this point, so many people had touched it, but it was so bizarre because they just assumed that it had drifted to the area in the river where it was found. But the contents of the backpack were dry, they were undamaged, and when they went through it, they were all in good condition despite being weeks in the jungle, or if they had been actually in the river. And apparently during this time, there had been heavy rain that had been gone through the area for weeks, and they just figured that everything should have been soaked. Lisanne's asthma inhaler was not among the belongings that was recovered, and investigators determined that her belongings had 34 different fingerprints on the bag. I guess from what they say, and this is just the report, some DNA was also detected on the backpack contents, but none of this led to any serious actions from the police, which is all very, very concerning because obviously something doesn't make sense here. But I think the biggest piece of evidence found was the discovery of Lisanne's Canon PowerShot camera that had over 100 images on the memory card. And also in this backpack were their passports, their cell phones, their sunglasses, all their cash, and their bras that had been taken off, which doesn't make any sense. Now, on this camera, there were over 133 consecutive photographs found. And of course, the one mystery shot, image number 509, which was somehow deleted, is the one that everyone talks about. Now, of course, this camera had no GPS location option. Investigators could only kind of guess the location based on the photos, surroundings, and that were visible to them. And this is one thing that a lot of people say they've theorized, like why these girls may have taken these pictures, maybe to alert somebody or to scare off animals. But the thing that I think they might have been doing, because they've been researched and it was found that they were done in a certain way, I think if you're in a dark place and you can't see, if you have a camera like that, you take a picture and then you look at the picture itself, you can see what's in front of you. Obviously, you can't use the flash to light your way because it would just be blinding. But in all my research, I haven't heard anybody else talk about this option, that they possibly were just taking the photographs to then look at the camera's LCD display to see what was in front of them, possibly because one of them had become injured, or maybe they just didn't think of it until that particular time. I mean, the pictures on April 1st were just the basic, tourist shots. They were laughing and smiling. They had a bright, sunny day, and they were just taking selfies and overlook of the divide. Most of the pictures were taken by Lisanne with Kris walking ahead on the trail. The girls were apparently following an indigenous trail near a creek of stream bed that had headed downhill away from the destination of Boquete. Now, Kris's face in one of the face shots shows what a lot of people say is anxiety, and this is around 7:40 p.m. And again, there is so much information, like dissecting every single one of the photos. For example, image number 508 is the last image taken by Lisanne and Kris. But there are two versions of this photo. One shows that it was 8 seconds after photo number 507, but another version of the same photo states that this version of Kris looking backward was taken 50 seconds before the previous photo of her passing the creek. It's impossible to say what actually was going on here, but the Dutch investigators that were working on this, they really worked hard to figure out how to undelete this missing photo, which I guess is normally not that hard, but in this particular case was, and they failed to discover the missing photo and why it was deleted. In my opinion, this was something that these girls, something happened after they had reached the summit. They were having a great time, and something happened right away because their 911 calls and emergency calls started right away. It's possible as something as so simple as the dog running off and them trying to chase it and find it and then subsequently getting lost. And that's where, trouble started. And maybe the girls deleted the photos themselves. But it's also plausible that the authorities took the photo off of the camera because they didn't want something for everyone else to see because it was consistent with, their investigation and something that they may have thought was foul play. Obviously, something very terrible happened to these girls during this incident. And I believe that once they got up to the summit, something happened, whether it was the dog running away, them trying to chase it, going to try and find it in, an off direction. And then I do believe that one of the girls suffered an injury. In some of these photographs, they pictured like what looks like a Pringles bottom with toilet paper around it, which I'm guessing they probably erected to try and signal for help. But I just can't imagine what these women went through. I mean, being in the jungle is scary enough alone, but being in the jungle alone at night, it was obviously raining a lot of times. There's this one picture of the back of her head, and it looks like she may have been injured. But, this is all speculation. We still have no real answers. And I know a lot of the investigation focuses on pictures that took place on April 8th between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. They were in complete darkness where you could obviously see that rain was falling. Some were taken a few seconds apart, others 15 minutes later, and then several had been taken deliberately as if they were blurred, indicating that they were not taken under duress. It just seems very bizarre, and a lot of internet sleuths have speculated that the women were trying to use the camera as a light source, but I disagree with that. I think that if they were trying to use the camera in some sense, they were using it to take a picture of what was in front of them and then looking at the LCD screen so that they could see what was in front of them, so they could prevent from falling. There are a bunch of these monkey bridges in the area, which are very dangerous. They're very hard to navigate. I'll put a picture of a few, but they are hard for anybody. And if you've been injured, it's even harder. And a close-up of this one shot of Kris's head does seem that there was an injury, but we can't know for sure. And then when their remains were found, it was even more bizarre and raised many questions. For one, why were the girls trying to go downstream, which was highly, suggested not to, as by all the guides. And when the remains were found, one of the remains was just a boot with a foot in it, which apparently, I guess, according to experts, is common. But apparently, according to some of the other experts, some of the remains of the other woman, they were found and they were bleached. And the amount of time that had passed, that was just a very odd thing to have occurred. And not only that, the backpack being found in the condition it was leads me to believe that one of two things happened. Either somebody in the village just found the backpack, they didn't think anything of it, and they thought, oh, I just found something. Then they realized the news and they realized it and they just brought it back and put it back where they found it. It just doesn't make sense why that backpack and everything would be there in that pristine condition. And according to the report, the forensic analysis found that the cut on the bone had no blood on it. There was no signs of cutting, hacking, gunshot, or teeth marks. And then they found at least 33 other scattered bones, mainly from a left leg, that were also discovered along the same riverbank a few miles from the cable bridge and the dry stones where some investigators think that the nighttime photos may have been taken. And then a few other things were found. One retrieved were found scattered sometimes miles apart from one another. One half of the pelvic bone of Kris was found, and later Kris's number 10 right rib bone was also found. as well as her femur, upper leg bone. And it just, all this stuff, none of it made sense. A rolled up ball of skin from Lisanne's shin was also located by investigators sometime later, apparently August 29, 2014, and the forensic pathologist later found that the skin was still in an early stage of decomposition, even containing maggots, which, in contrast with Kris's fully bleached and clean bones, the pathologist found that the bone marrow and the femur, the tibia, lisanne proved to be undecomposed, which just didn't make any sense because they had obviously passed at roughly around the same time. So it was what happened to these women, and it is speculated that a lot of people think that there was a third party involved. And me personally, I think because of the way the evidence was found, the backpack, the shorts being, just folded neatly on the riverbank, hey, it could have just been like a coincidence and like a local finding it and then realizing that there was something nefarious going on, so they put it back. But this whole case just doesn't make any sense. And I think what happened was these girls went up for this hike and something happened once they got done doing their Facebook posts that they had. Maybe the dog ran off, they tried to chase it, one of them became injured. It's hard to say. Again, this is all speculation, but these were two very young, beautiful women, very intelligent women that had their whole lives ahead of them. And I can't imagine being lost in the jungle at night. I mean, it is pitch black and it was apparently raining. I can't imagine how scary that must have been. And we can see from their phone records, they did try dialing 911 or the equivalent of 911 in various countries, and they never were able to get through, which was very unfortunate. Now, eventually one of their phones powered off, and then the other phone was attempted to access several times, but they didn't have the right passcode. I'm guessing that was whoever survived after the other one passed. Again, it's hard to say, but this is just a tragedy any way you look at it. There's also been a lot of suspicion on the tour guide that was supposed to take them on the tour the next day, who was just conveniently there very early on in the investigation, and who has reportedly, and again, this is just what the media has reported, that he has had some negative feedback from other women saying that he was harassing them and being, unsettling on trail. So it's hard to say, whether that's just a coincidence or if he was involved. But I find that, all the facts, when we look at them together, the fact that, their backpack was found with their bras and everything was inside, everything was intact, it makes no sense. I mean, I can understand two women getting lost in the jungle and perishing, but then why would they take off part of their clothes, and then why would they put them all in their backpack? Why would they fold up their jeans and put them on a rock? A lot of it just doesn't make sense. And unfortunately, I think there was a lot of blotched investigation during this whole thing. They had the backpack, and they really, from what I understand, they did take some DNA, but they didn't take all the fingerprints. And at that point, who knows how many people had touched it. And I think for the families of Lisanne Froon and Kris Kremers, it's just a tragedy, because they want answers, and I don't think they'll get them anytime soon. I hope they will, but I do believe that I think that this all started with something innocent. I think that they just went up for a hike, and then something happened, whether the dog ran off and they tried to run off and find the dog, and then one of them ended up getting injured. They tried calling 911 or help, and then another one got injured, and then they were in the jungle, lost at night, not knowing what to do, possibly running into another person, maybe this guide that was supposed to take them on the trip the next day. Because there is a lot of information sort of supporting that. But I do think that the one thing that was lost in a lot of the media coverage was the photographs. And I think that one main reason they might have been taking the photographs was just to see what was in front of them. Like I said, a lot of people have raised a lot of questions and spent a lot of time on this case. And one of the questions is, who erased picture 509, and why didn't the Panamanian nationals release the full autopsies of the girls? Why do we not know whose fingerprints were on the digital camera and on the phones? And do we really know who made the last 911 or 112 calls that they did make? And the water bottle that was in the backpack was full. I mean, there's so many things that were unanswered in this case. Why were there no DNA samples taken from the bottle itself? The girls had, warned other youngsters in Boquete to not venture out without a guide. They were known to be meticulous planners. So apparently, according to Strange Outdoors, why did they decide to go out alone on this wilderness hike? I mean, maybe just they thought that this guy was a bad guy. And again, the dog Blue, maybe they were walking him and he just ran off. Why wasn't he in any of the photographs? I mean, there's just so many unanswered questions in this case. And why do statements of all the witnesses contradict the photographic evidence? Why weren't they found despite being lost for 11 days and people using all these resources? And why we've never been given the exact location where they supposedly fell and perished? All these questions have been raised by numerous investigators and drafted by many people. And why were there no messages left by themselves, like for their loved ones, if they knew that they were going to perish? Why didn't they leave any messages on their cell phones? And how is it possible for Kris and Lisanne to switch their phones on and on so methodically and set times without having a watch or means to know the time in the jungle, or not tell each other their passcodes if they were in such peril? There's just so many unanswered questions in this case, and I think the world lost two beautiful young rising stars, and I just hope that they do get justice one day, and I hope that this case will be solved, because I think that there is still a lot of pieces that are missing, and I just wanted to give you guys the facts and leave a lot of it to your own thing, to think about like what you guys think about it and what you think may have happened. And definitely leave me a comment and talk about it and let me know what you guys think may have happened, because this is one of those cases that has just always weighed really heavily on my mind. What's even weirder, the one witness, Osman Venezuela, died by an accident in his car crash. Was this an accident, or was he actually murdered? And is it true that the photos on his phone of the girls matching the description of the girls, Lisanne and Kris and Lisanne? I mean, what made Lisanne's foot break off on her ankle? Did she twist her ankle and fall and break? And why were there bleach on Kris's bones? I mean, there's just so many questions in this case. And aside from them, I guess there was a lot of other remains found in a similar area. And it just seems like something else a lot deeper is going on in this case. And I just really think that, if the backpack had been in the water, and there would have been obvious signs of that. And I just think that there was a lot of mishap in this investigation, and I just don't understand how, some of the girls' jeans ended up on the shore, and why were all their bras and other stuff in the backpack? I mean, if you're in peril, why would you take all that stuff off? It just makes no sense. And yes, it's possible that this was just a tragic accident. I mean, these girls went out with a hike with their dog Blue, and they ended up getting lost. But the way the evidence stacks up, the way the backpack was found, the shorts, some of the other things, and just the way the whole investigation was done, I just feel like something else was going on. And that's just my personal opinion, but I would love to hear from you guys, because this is one of those cases that has always been very hard for me to understand, and I've looked at, and I know there's a lot of stuff I didn't include in this as far as pictures and whatnot, but you can find a lot of that on the internet. I'll have information in the description as well. But I can't imagine what those women went through in those days that they were out in the jungle. I mean, it is just dark. It's pitch black. It was supposedly raining. They had no idea where they were. They were probably injured. And I just hope that one day we will find answers and be able to bring these families justice and let them know what happened to their beautiful daughters that had their whole lives ahead of them. I want to dedicate this video to Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon and all their friends and family and their loved ones, and just remind everybody that, during the holiday season, this is the time for love and to give back. And even though sometimes we don't understand what other people are doing, we can still love completely. We can love fully without understanding. I want to thank everybody for watching. I wish you all a very happy holiday. And please be respectful in the comments if you choose to leave them. Special thank you to co.ag for providing the background music, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me till the end. And I know in this video, it's hard because there are so many details and there are so many facts, and I just wanted to present you with the basic facts because there are so many ways that we can get deluded, and sometimes, like when we look at these cases, we can get sort of obsessed, and sometimes we can get it to the wrong level. And I just wanted to present this case and see what you guys had to say about it and make you bring up your own suggestions. And I want to thank you all for doing that, and I want to thank you all for watching and all for subscribing and all your support and all your dedication, and anything I can ever do, just comment, email. So much glory to you, and happy holidays, and I love you all.